Good afternoon, everyone. I am Susan Phillips, the president of the Asian Chamber of Texas in Dallas. Thank you for joining us for our annual business conference and awards event today. If you've heard it once, you've heard it 1,000 times. These are indeed unprecedented times that we are living in. COVID has brought us to our knees, and we as a community and as a nation are pushing for recovery and healing in every aspect. As an organization, we are not turning a blind eye to these hard conversations. In fact, we are facing them head on. We choose to inspire and activate change through our advocacy and through the programming that we give. I know we could all use some inspiration right now, and that's exactly what we're about to get with this program. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our inspiring leader, Ms. Neha Kunte, the chairwoman for Asian Chamber of Texas in Dallas. Neha, go ahead and take over.
Thank you very much, Susan. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to address this distinguished gathering. On behalf of the Chamber and Board, I want to extend special thanks to all our audience for attending this event. Thank you to our sponsors for this event, National ACE, NEC Corporation of America, and Dallas ISD, Women's Business Enterprise Department. We also would like to thank our community partners, Dallas College, Parkland Hospital, Mead Center, Bank of America, Toyota, Texas Instrument, DFW Airport, DART, Coca-Cola, Encore, Federal Reserve Bank, Communities Foundation of Texas, and Southwest Airlines. Our special thanks to Japan America Society and JEDRO for their marketing support. ACT is proud to bring this two-day event for you all and hope you can make the most of it. As we all know, we are all pivoting our businesses and workplaces. We're becoming more and more creative, although we are physically distancing, but we are socially and emotionally connected stronger. Being said that, friends, it is my honor and privilege to introduce today's keynote speaker, none other than Chow, CEO, AT&T Business. When I saw her bio, I was overwhelmed, and seeing her education background and enormous work that she has done. I am so glad, and I heard you yesterday having conversation about bias and belonging at AT&T's virtual viewpoint. And I was moved by your comment on reframing the bias and creating the culture of belonging. I was able to relate to that discussion, and that gave me some confidence. Anne was appointed as CEO of AT&T Business in September 2019. She and her organization of over 30,000 employees are responsible for serving nearly 3 million business customers in upward of 200 countries and territories around the world, covering over $36 billion in revenue. AT&T Business customers span all industries, including the public sector, as well as nearly all of the world's Fortune 1000 companies. She is the first woman to hold this position and first woman of color CEO in AT&T's history. With decades in industry, Anne's experience is diverse in both breadth and depth. She has led many global organizations through major transformation, developing and executing innovative growth strategies while building role model relationships. She is passionate about education, diversity and inclusion, advancing women in technology, cultivating next generation leaders, and customer excellence. As the founder member of AT&T University's governing board, Anne actively supports the company's leadership development imperative. She is also involved in many AT&T employees group worldwide and serves as the executive sponsor of AT&T's Women of Business Employees Network and the Asia Pacific Women's Organization, and coaches, mentors, and inspires thousands of leaders and readers through her internal blog. She has been voted best blog across the company for past 9 years. She currently serves on the board of directors of Franklin Covey Company and is a member of Committee of 100 and Georgia Tech's advisory board, as well as the co-chair of Georgia Tech's parent board. She is a co-author of Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias, How to Reframe Bias, Cultivate Connections, and Create High-Performing Teams, published by Simon and Schuster, and it will be released in November 2020. Anne holds master's degree in business administration with distinction from the Johnson School of Cornell University and a Bachelor of Science degree and Master's of Engineering degree in electrical engineering from Cornell. She is also a graduate of the pre-college division of Juilliard School of Music. Friends, please join me welcoming Anne Chow.
Great. Hello there. It's great to be here with all of you, and thank you, Neha, for that beautiful, beautiful introduction. I'm so humbled. So it is a pleasure to be here with all of you today and to celebrate the Asian Chamber of Texas Awards in this virtual conference. I wish that we could be together, perhaps over some delicious food, over some live conversation in person, but there will be time for that, I'm absolutely confident, in the future. To start things off, I want to say congratulations to all of the winners out there that are being awarded and recognized and celebrated today. I know that the Chamber is celebrating your contributions to the community and your commitment to prosperity and growth. I'd also like to say thank you to the Chamber for inviting me to come speak with all of you today about a couple of thoughts that are on my mind, as well as just sharing a little bit of my journey as a fellow Asian American, and how that might manifest itself in terms of success and how we might look at the future. I'd also like to wish all of you good health. I hope that all of you are staying safe with your loved ones as we navigate through this unprecedented time, namely the pandemic, an economic recession, as well as social and racial injustices and systemic racism across our society. Never has there been a time when all of us coming together across the community has been so critical for us to move forward and make progress together. So what I thought I'd do, because I've not been with this group before, is tell you a little bit about my journey to this place and this moment in time. You know, I think one of the tenets that I have always had in my life and as a leader now in the corporate world is that each one of us bring a very unique perspective and a unique point of view to the world. We are each our own greatest gifts to that world, and it starts with our foundation and our upbringing. If I think about my journey to becoming, and yes, this is a little bit of a coin of a phrase of Michelle Obama's book, which is highly recommended, by the way, if you've not yet read it. My journey, of course, starts with my parents. And my parents immigrated to the United States back in the 1960s. So I am a second generation American. And they came to the United States, to Missouri, actually, to the Midwest, which is where I was born. And they came here because they knew that the United States, that America was the land where hope lived. And it was the country that you could be whatever it is that you aspired to be, that you worked hard to be. And it was a place where your past did not dictate your future. My brother and I have a younger brother who is, of course, a doctor, very stereotypical. My younger brother and I went through a very simple upbringing. My parents came to this country with very little to their name, less than $500 US to their name, and raised us with some guiding tenets and values that I embrace and move forward with me today. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. As we were raised, you know, we were taught that education was foundational and really, really critical and important. And my father actually came to this country to study for his graduate degree in electrical engineering as well as his PhD. And he landed his dream job after finishing school at none other than the very, very famous AT&T Bell Laboratories. So I will say that living here at the intersection of technology and people and in this incredible industry is a little bit in my DNA and in my blood, if you will. So we grew up in New Jersey. So I am from the East Coast. I'm relatively newly transplanted to Texas. We just celebrated 5 years here in Texas over the summer, and it has been really a wonderful experience. When I think about my background, you know, I did train at the Juilliard School. I at one point thought that I was going to be a musician. And then I realized that success might be a little bit more elusive as a professional musician. So of course I pivoted to engineering. I was also a Girl Scout, which also then will kind of inform some of the foundation of the values that my parents set in me. Very much focused on service and community, and did go to a wonderful school, Cornell University, up in upstate New York, which is where I was for 6 years. I will have to admit too that my blood has very much thinned here in the Texas community. I will admit to wanting and needing a coat when it's 40 or 50 degrees, when I'm used to, or was used to when I was in college, temperatures close to 0 and major blizzards. So I have definitely been acclimated to Texas. I am the proud mother of 2 daughters. They are both in college. My older daughter is at Georgia Tech, and she is a 4th-year student majoring in chemical engineering. My younger daughter has just started at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and she is intending to study biomedical engineering. I'm married and I have a dog, as you can see here. And so I wanted to just take a moment to introduce myself to you, as well as a little bit of my background, so that you could have that as a foundation for this discussion on becoming and ultimately belonging. If I think about then kind of my, my philosophy and my approach, and what is this word belonging actually all about? Let me pause for a moment and share with you my perspective on this word that is so vitally important, that through this pandemic, I think there has never been a time when the idea, the practice, the importance, the action of belonging, the desire for belonging has been so critical. So what is belonging all about? As we think about diversity, as we think about inclusion, as we think about equity, I believe that inclusion is not enough. And we've all, kind of heard this analogy that many of us who are passionate about diversity and inclusion have used, which is diversity is being asked to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging, in my view, is about bringing our own unique dances to the table and helping teach each other's and learn each other's dance so that we truly all belong. I don't believe that you can stop at inclusion. Why? Because inclusion, and as powerful as an inclusive workplace and an inclusive community is, implies that one person or a group is deciding to include another, right? And that is really not where we should stop, right? Where we should aspire to is to develop a community across the public sector, across the private sector, across the nonprofit sector that pulls us all together so that we all belong. A very famous person who's going to be receiving the award on behalf of the Dallas Mavericks once said, every voice matters, and there is no question, that's St. Marshall, by the way, every voice does matter. And that is what belonging is all about, is ensuring that every voice, every person, every organization has an opportunity to belong. So a little bit about this notion of becoming to belonging. So each of us as business leaders, as community leaders, as civic leaders, as leaders in our community, as leaders in our family, each of us has an opportunity to choose to lead. I am one who believes that leadership is a choice. It is not something you are born into. It is not something that is associated with your title or your position or your particular stature in life. It is something that you choose to do. And I believe that contemporary leadership is all about embracing and supporting others in their becoming journey to aspire to a place and a time where we all belong. Right? And that is really the inspiration for this conversation that I'm having with all of you, is this notion that all of us are becoming and all of us are striving for belonging. All right, and we owe it to each other to support each other on that journey. A couple of things that I wanted to share with you, because I think that when we reflect on this incredible moment of time, the question for so many of us, especially across the business community, is how do I not only survive through these crises, but how do I thrive, right? How do I reinvent my business? How do I think about my partnership ecosystem? How do I think about my customer base, about my employees, right? And my community in a way that I can drive breakthrough in my outcomes? whether they're measured in terms of my business results and my financial results, whether they're measured in customer satisfaction or how I'm delivering a unique customer experience, whether they're manifested themselves in innovation and bringing a brand new idea and a brand new value proposition to the marketplace. This is really all about how to drive breakthrough in times of incredible duress. What I'd like to share is just some thoughts on some of the areas that we at AT&T have focused on as we have continued to advance our commitment to our community, our workforce, and to diversity, equity, and inclusion towards an environment of belonging, not only for ourselves, but for our customers and others. A little bit about my career at AT&T. I just celebrated this summer my 30-year service anniversary. And I find it actually incredibly hard to believe that it's been that long. I know all of you out there are saying that it can't possibly be that long as you are, looking at, my Asian skin, if you will, right? That's another inside joke there. But as it relates to my service at AT&T, I'm on my 17th job. I am on my 26th boss. And so I have had plenty of opportunity throughout my career to work with teams and individuals and customers all around the world to shape my point of view about what is critical for success and really how can we all move forward in a way that we are better together. So a couple of things that we have advanced, and you heard a little bit about this in my introduction, in my bio, but AT&T has had a long-standing passion for employee groups. Some that I have been very, very close to over the years, of course, have been Inspiration. I'm the executive sponsor for AT&T Women of Business, which is an organization that is now, well over 4,500 people around the world who have joined. And we collectively together tackle topics that are important and very topical to women in business, whether it's the importance of male allies, whether it's the importance of a focus on multicultural women and women of color. We have advanced discussions like that in a very constructive and collaborative way. I also support the Asia Pacific Women's Organization, which is an organization that is focused on our women team members in Asia, where we are addressing topics that are very critical to our community there, things like mental health issues, as well as childcare and support. And then one of the initiatives that has been recently launched over the last couple of years that I'm incredibly proud of, and I view it to be a breakthrough, if you will, in terms of opportunity set, is a very explicit focus and a program focused on women of color. By the year 2050 or 2060, somewhere in that range, women of color will become the majority of all women in the United States. And they represent an incredible force as it relates to customer base, as it relates to our future workforce. And so I felt really strongly that we at AT&T needed to step up and continue to lead in this area. And so we've developed a program specifically for women as well as their supervisors to help them realize their fullest potential and really lead thriving careers within AT&T. Some of my outside of AT&T endeavors include being part of a relatively new group of executives in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the North Texas area, and that is the Asian American Executive Network here in DFW. I've had a chance to meet this, with so many members of this burgeoning community who are leaders in each of their respective industries and each of their respective companies. And it is an incredible opportunity as we have looked at in this organization, this Asian Chamber as being the first Asian Chamber in Texas and the oldest one, acknowledging the importance of the Asian community across our Texas community. I serve on the board of Franklin Covey, as was mentioned, as well as on the president's board at Georgia Tech. And each of these actions, by the way, and each of these activities for me are really all about advancing the imperative of belonging, right? Of advocacy, of support, of community in many different ways. I feel so strongly that from an AT&T perspective, we have been, and I have been, so fortunate and so blessed in my career that it is important to get engaged even more deeply in many different facets of our community and of business in aggregate. I happen to serve also this year as the campaign chair for the United Way of Metro Dallas's annual giving campaign. And our focus is to launch and is around the Aspire 2030 goals around education, income, and health. And for me, my campaign year here is focus on health. Not only our physical health has become so forefront during this pandemic, but our mental, emotional, and spiritual, however you translate that to be for each of you, health, as well as preventative health, as well as overall wellness, okay? And so I believe that each one of us have an opportunity to engage in a leadership approach, whether you are, again, in the private sector, public sector, nonprofit world, or in our community. And it is a time where unity and all of us coming together will be what helps us move through these crises, learning from them and getting better, and ultimately moving from survival to thriving. You know, one of the questions that I often get, especially when I'm talking to a group that is oriented around the Asian community, is, and what lessons might you share, right? Being an Asian female and being certainly part of a minority group, if you will, in terms of Asian female in leadership, woman of color in a leadership or CXO role. And so what I thought I'd do here is close on a couple of things. I wanted to share with you a handful of life lessons that I have pulled forward throughout my life and that really are founded in the roots of who I am. Thanks to my parents, thanks to my friends, thanks to the incredible experience that I have had along my own unique journey. And I would offer to each of you that each of you have your own guiding tenets of what have gotten you to this incredible place at this incredible time in support of this organization. And these will be, when we bring all of these unique perspectives together, again, we will make progress as we have never seen before. So a couple of lessons then. A couple of lessons as a second generation American, Asian American CEO. Okay, so first lesson, this one will not be a surprise to many of you, and that is that education is foundational. My parents raised my brother and I to believe and to know that education is the great equalizer. And as a result, I have a point of view that says life is about learning, and every experience that we have, every opportunity we have to learn something is a wonderful experience. And by having a frame of reference that progress and success is really enabled by lifelong learning, there comes with that a humility, because you realize that you will never know everything. In fact, it's impossible. And so you don't shy away from knowledge, or you don't shy away from acknowledging the fact that you may not have knowledge or skills in a particular area. And it's important to go find others and to surround yourself with who can complement your strengths. Second one, do your best, okay? This is one that my parents drilled into me over and over and over. And it's a little bit tongue in cheek. If I got an A, they'd say, could you have gotten an A+? If I got a B, they would have said, hey, could you have gotten an A? If I got 100, they would have said, was there extra credit? Could you get 105? And as they were pushing me, this is really all about them wanting for me to do my absolute best, right? Translate that to, was I realizing my fullest potential, right? And am I applying myself in the way that I was bringing my best forward? My best, by the way, was not necessarily always the best. In fact, most of the time it's not the best, because how many Olympic athletes can you have? One of my decision points about why I didn't major in music was I knew I would never be the best or even in that stratosphere, right? And so I didn't want to build a career on that. So the difference between doing your best versus being the best is absolutely critical. I think this is very apropos in the business environment as we think about our businesses, and our value proposition is, what is the best value proposition that we can bring to the market? The third thing is, dream big and go for it. My parents taught me to set the bar higher and higher and higher to realize my fullest potential at every stage of my young life. And it is something that I have carried forward with me now as I am at this point in my career, and it has been a part of my formula for success and contribution. The fourth one, immigrant paranoia. A moment about this one, growing up, and even to this day, you always have this fear that all of this could evaporate and it could be taken away, right? And so I am always planning for the worst case scenario, right? Because if you plan for the worst case scenario while you're also planning and hoping for the best case scenario, you will always be prepared, whether it's on a personal level or on a professional level. And I believe that that immigrant paranoia in me is something that has fueled my rigor around strategy, around planning, around operational execution in a way that has absolutely contributed to my ability to be in this business world as I am today. The fifth one, I think this one is, I think, uniquely, I would tell you that as a woman of color, I feel uniquely qualified around these aspects, which is to build bridges to find common ground. It is a role that I've played throughout my career, whether it's professionally or personally, or in the community. And I believe that, again, fundamentally, by all of us coming together, the leadership attributes that I have developed over time, we will be better and we can be better. And that's something that I learned from very specifically my mother, who was a master gatherer of people, right? And to this day, those lessons and those skills ring true for me. And then the last one is to pay it forward. When I look at what my parents did by coming to this country with almost nothing to their name, they were aided here by so many different people. And they felt so appreciative to this incredible country and the people who enabled them to belong, right, throughout their many, many decades here. And what my parents taught me was that, you can never go back and pay back all of those people who helped you. So what you are compelled to do, what you must do, is pay it forward. And it is so important to leave a lasting legacy so that this place is better off because you were in it. And when you go, that feeling will still be there and that legacy will be there. And so those are just a couple of lessons and insights from my own perspective of lessons I've carried forward from my becoming journey into my belonging journey. And the last thing that I would wrap on here is, for those of you who know me, either as a customer, a partner, colleague, or friend, you know that the hallmark of, in my view of leadership, is that it is about relationships. And so I would leave you with this quote. It's one of my mantras about life, and especially about business in the context of life. And that is that life is about relationships. And so we must be sure to seek and foster meaningful ones. And I thank all of you for your time and your openness and your willingness to continue to foster relationships again across our great community here in Texas and North Texas. And I welcome the opportunity to meet with you at some point in the future, face to face. Till then, take good care. And here's to closing the year strong and even more exciting, more productive 2021. Thank you.
And thank you so much for sharing your journey and life lessons with us. I mean, your inspiring journey about becoming, belonging, and breakthrough. We really appreciate all that you do to make this world a better place. I loved your comment about the importance of equity and that inclusion is not enough. And your last comment that life is all about relationship. You definitely walk the talk and, champion of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And, on behalf of the Asian Chamber of Texas and everyone here today, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. I can't wait to read your book, The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias. Thank you again, Anne. Really appreciate it. All right. So now we move on to our, I hope everyone can hear me. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Mohammed Farshuri. I'm the event chair and vice chairman of the Asian Chamber of Texas. And after that inspiring speech from one of my favorite speakers, and Chow, now we move on to the Asian Chamber of Texas's annual awards session. The ACT's Asian Chamber of Texas's Corporate Community Engagement Award recognizes the most engaged and innovative companies that demonstrate how an organization can make an impact in society by engaging its employees, partners, local nonprofits, and work for communities in which it operates. So I would like to congratulate Dallas Mavericks for being chosen as this year's winner of the Asian Chamber of Texas's Corporate Engagement Award for their outstanding volunteer engagement and community support during these historical and challenging times. Dallas schools received thousands of personal protective equipment from MAVs. They also supported the hourly arena workers that received payments for 8 games during lockdown. It also provided thousands of meals to the most underserved communities in Dallas. Dallas Mavs were the champions of public service messages, encouraging Dallas residents to wear a mask. They have supported frontline workers and many local businesses and nonprofits in the North Texas area during these challenging times. These are just a few of the amazing things Dallas Mavericks have done this year. And another reason I'm so excited and honored to announce this award is because one of my favorite human beings in the world is here to receive it. I'm a product of her vision of allowing people to bring their whole self to work, to this country, to this community, and be a part of her army of mad people that we call it, make a difference people. And so please join me in welcoming the Dallas Mavericks CEO, Cint Marshall. Congratulations, Cint, to you and your amazing team.
Thank you, Muhammad. I am so happy to be here, and you just have no idea how proud I am of you. Oh my goodness, my heart is just full to just watch the amazing things that you have been doing in the community and in your company. And so, yes, we're part of that mad army. And then, of course, to be here with my dear, dear friend, Ann Chow. And I just love you, sister. Appreciate what you just talked about in terms of becoming and belonging. And you're right. Our leadership promise, our workplace promise at the Dallas Mavericks is every voice matters and everybody belongs. And so I am so proud of this award. Oh my gosh, I'm so proud that the Asian Chamber of Texas just thought enough of us and what we're doing at the Mavs to give us this award. It means so much. It means a lot to be recognized for the types of things that we're doing. We do a lot, obviously, on the court, but we try to really participate and do things off the court. So on behalf of the Dallas Mavericks, on behalf of Gail O'Bannon, who is our diversity and equity and inclusion vice president, on behalf of Mark Cuban, Donnie Nelson, Rick Carlisle, all the folks at the Mavs, I just want to say thank you. And I'm just so honored. It's especially touching to have Muhammad introduce this and to come behind Ann, two of my dearest friends on the planet. So you can count on the Dallas Mavs. You know we are partners. We are here for you. We are all about making progress together and being mad together, making a difference. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Cint.
All right, I'll see y'all later. Oh, I want to stay for the rest.
All right, back to you.
Mr. Hendra Vijaya is the CEO of Forever Gifts located in Arlington, Texas. Hendra, his wife, and one employee started Forever Gifts as a wholesale business in 2004. They sold retail Christmas products and decor to small businesses across the US. It was in 2006, they sealed a deal with Costco and Walgreens, and after that, there was no turning back. With his passion in technology, they expanded the customer base to the giants like Walmart, Costco, Kohl's, Vineyards, Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, and Wayfair, with sales over $250 million over the period. Hendra, a MIS graduate of UTD, is seen as a man of integrity and with a pulse on customer needs. In 2020, they started sourcing PPE products. American Airlines being their first customer to procure PPE for the frontline employees, followed by HEB, Publix, and Oli. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Hendra Vijaya, CEO of Forever Gifts, for the 2020 Asian Chamber of Texas Business of the Year Award.
Thank you, Urmil, for the introduction. Thank you to the Asian Chambers of Texas for this great award, and congratulations on putting together this incredible conference of Asian American business leaders here in Texas. We are locally owned small business family business here locally in Arlington. We have about 11 people locally here. And since March, from my mentor, Albert Shan, kind of asked me to help his friend at American Airlines to provide their PP needs. So we are so grateful to have him as my mentor over here. And since then, our PP business has been growing this year basically our business growing about 30%. And we want to contribute to our local economies as well. And we, as a company, always value the importance of giving back to our local communities. And we look forward to working with the ACT to support others in our community during these challenging times. And once again, thank you for the ACT for the award. And we are humbled and honored to receive this award. If we can help your business in any way, please reach out to me at any time. Thank you and stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendra. Okay, next. 32 years ago, a seed was planted in the name of Central Dallas Food Pantry, widely known as City Square today. City Square is a non-profit organization, 501c3, that is doing phenomenal job in fighting poverty, setting an example on equality and inclusiveness through actions in South Dallas. City Square works tirelessly in 4 areas: hunger, housing, health, and hope. Providing food pantry, bringing food to the community, mobile meals program, after school, and in the summer. City Square is also the largest non-profit provider of affordable housing in the city of Dallas. Workforce development provides the youth of tomorrow a fighting chance to enter the economy with confidence. For last 3 decades, and especially in testing time like these, when 300,000 people living in poverty don't know when and where the next meal is going to come from, City Square and its army of volunteers have opened their hearts to make sure no one sleeps hungry. It is my great privilege to give 2020 Asian Chamber of Texas Humanitarian and Service Award to City Square. We have John Siebert, President, COO of City Square, who will accept this award. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much for this amazing award. My team is thrilled and so honored by this recognition. I cannot be prouder of the work City Square's done in the midst of this pandemic. It's been kind of the finest hour for my team. I'm thankful for their service and dedication every day. They've been able to pivot all of our programs to adapt to the safety protocols of COVID-19 and have continued to feed our neighbors, to provide housing, continued to provide healthcare, to take care of youth in Dallas, to do all the things that our community needs in the fight against poverty at a time when the pandemic threatens more with poverty. So we've done a lot of work in eviction prevention as well, and in short-term financial assistance. And so our team has really mobilized and done great work, and it's a shot in the arm to them to have this recognition and to see that has been recognized and affirmed and appreciated. So thank you so much for acknowledging our great work and the great team that's doing it. And I'm thankful for the Asian Chamber. Muhammad is a dear friend and brother, and through our friendship, I've gotten to know more about you, and I think you're a treasure in this community and an untapped resource that I think will continue to do great work in our community. So thank you for who you are and for your commitment to serving this community and giving of yourselves. In that way, you're very much like us. And so we feel like we've developed a new friendship and new partners in the fight. So thank you for this acknowledgement. Thank you for who you are. And we're grateful to be this year's recipient. Thank you.
All right, Neha.
Yes, so our next category is arts and cultures. I am proud to introduce Amanda Austin, the founder and CEO of Dallas Comedy House from 2009 until 2020, where she oversaw day-to-day operations of the theater, training centers, corporate training team, and restaurants. What started in the back room of the local restaurant with just 6 students and one show per week grew to a student, performer, and alumni base of 100, almost thousands over the past 11 and a half years. Just before COVID-19 hit, Dallas Comedy House was producing an average of 25 shows per week at their Deep Ellum location and was home to the annual Dallas Comedy Festival. We recognize Amanda for all her contribution, services, and dedication in making this place, Dallas, as the home for local talents. Please join me in congratulating Amanda Austin with Dallas Comedy House 2020 Asian Chamber of Texas Arts and Culture Award. Amanda.
Thank you so much. I don't have the award here, but in the spirit of improvisational comedy, I'm just going to hold it. I feel like it's about this size, right? And I will save a beautiful spot on my my desk for this. You know, it's not often that comedy is acknowledged or recognized for the artistic impact it can have on a community. So on behalf of just the thousands of students and performers and staff that have had such a big and small part of Dallas Comedy House over the past 11 years, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Also, what an honor to join the ranks of all of these other recipients, as well as the previous recipients of this particular award. So 2020 has been such a trying time for a lot of us. So this is a very bright spot, and comedy is all about bringing a smile to people's face. And this one brought one to mind. So thank you so much. I also want to say, I'd like to piggyback on what John Seibert said and just give a nod to my friend Muhammad. He is such a force to be reckoned with in the most amazing way. So keep your eye out for Muhammad. He's doing really great things for so many people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. We are actually wishing you all the very best and would love to see what you do next.
Thank you.
All right, the next category is the Chairman's Award. I will tell you, I had to stumble upon this one for quite a long time and I could not pick one. So guess what? I have two. Naeem Ahmad is a renowned business owner running his CPA firm in Dallas since 2003. Born and raised in Pakistan, he spent most of his early careers in Europe working for PwC, managing accounts over $100 million. He has been the really valued member of GDAC, now ACT, board since 2009 and have worn multiple hats from being a committee chair of Minority Business Enterprise, secretary, and all the way up to chairman. Naeem volunteered for several years, being mentor, friend, and advisor to many of us on this board and outside. He's very special to me, and he's very special to the chamber. Naeem Ahmad. The Chairman's Award goes to you.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you very much. I guess you can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much for honoring me with this. I'm sure there are a lot more deserving people, but whatever I've done for 10, 11 years for the chamber has really come from the bottom of my heart because I feel that that's the minimum I can do for the community. So it has been a pleasure. It was great being a chairman for a year as well. And having said that, I really look forward to, as long as I'm, alive and walking, stay with the chamber because this is probably the best organization I've ever joined. So under your leadership, Neha, you can count on me anytime. All the board members, all the executives, Sushma and Muhammad and all these people, I really love them and enjoy working with them. So I can show it to you what it looks like. Here it is. Thank you very much for honoring me. I appreciate it and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Naeem. And the second award is for Sushma Malhotra. Sushma has been with the chamber and she has been around volunteering numerous hours for several years. In her full-time job, she is in the banking industry and has managed multi-million loan profiles and portfolios. She is the Vice President of Senior Lending Officer with Southwestern National Bank since May 2017. And prior to that, Sushma was with Cathay Bank as a Vice President Lending Manager for nearly 11 years. And in her spare time, if she has, She has been dedicated it for all volunteer hours. She's a board member of Chetna since 2006, which is a nonprofit organization helping women of domestic violence who are victim of domestic violence and abuse. She has been a board member of GDAC, which is ACT, since 2014. She's chairperson of Mead Center for this year. She's member of Dallas Women's Lions Club since 2005 and is president for 2021. She is board member of India Association of North Texas since 2019. She's a dear friend of mine, and she has given her really volunteer hours to this chamber with her beautiful smile and always yes on her face. Thank you very much, Sushma. This year's Chairman's Award, the second nomination goes to Sushma Malhotra. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neha. I'm really, really honored and humbled by this. I mean, it was such a good surprise. Thank you. And I just want to take this opportunity to also congratulate the other awardees today. And I thank them for their hard work, their services, and all they have done for the community. And congrats to Naeem as well. I mean, he is really truly deserving person. And I also want to thank the Chamber's staff, Susan and Divya, for all their help and support during this time. And thank you so much, Neha, for your leadership. It really means a lot. And I know that we are all going the right way. I know this has been a very difficult year for everyone, but I hope that, the years ahead will be much better. But I know we are all doing very well. So thank you so much. And I want to show my award. I'm so happy, so humbled, so honored with this. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We have one last award to give. And of course, last but not least, it is our Volunteer of the Year Award. And this goes to somebody who's been working so hard with us throughout the year since 2019, since I pretty much started. And she's been a critical piece of our marketing strategy for 2019 as well as 2020. It is my great honor and privilege to give this award to our friend and colleague, Isabel Rocco. Isabel has a master's in math MBA, in marketing, and her focus is on customer experience and user experience. And she's been critical in helping us develop our marketing for social media, as well as our email campaign. And I can't thank you enough for everything that you do, Isabel. And for those of you that are looking for a marketing partner to help them re-strategize and figure out your business, Isabel is the woman for you. She is available and she is willing, and she's always coming with an open heart and an open mind and generous with her time. So without further ado, Isabel, congratulations, my friend.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you also to Neha, to Divya, to the board, and everyone else at the Asian Chamber of Texas who makes it the great organization that it is. I'm humbled and honored to be with such a distinguished group of awardees today. I still recall, Susan, last year when Crystal introduced us, it was also during the award ceremony. And I was inspired by your enthusiasm as we talked about rebranding the chamber. And several meetings later, as we lay out the marketing plans for the year, got really excited. And although the pandemic has posed challenges, the chamber has continued to rise to the occasion. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to help you with the marketing efforts for the chamber. And I also want to encourage everyone who's watching right now, if you want to volunteer and reach out to us to volunteer your time, your talent, and other resources, because we would love to work with you. Again, thank you so much, and more power to the Asian Chamber of Texas.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Moving on, we're about to take an intermission in just a few minutes, but before we do, I want to take a minute to introduce to you one of our partners, our organization, the National ACE organization, is works very closely with us. They are, one of our major sponsors for this event, and that's what made this possible. I want to introduce Mr. Jimmy Ferguson. He is representing the National ACE today. And Jimmy has owned and operated 23 McDonald's restaurants in Austin. He's from the Austin area. And prior to owning McDonald's, he held the position of Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students at Arkansas Tech University as a college administrator. Mr. Ferguson served as the National Association for Campus Activities as the chairman of the board of directors, and held by an appointment by Governor Bill Clinton to the Arkansas Governor's Council on Volunteerism. That was a mouthful. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring Mr. Ferguson on to talk about what their intentions are and what their legislative agenda that they produce. I know that's a longer conversation, Jimmy, but he takes a huge role in developing our legislative agenda with the perspective of the Asian community in mind. So without further ado, Jimmy, please take the stage.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to Asian Chamber of Texas, and it's such an honor to be here. I have attended one of your board meetings probably 8 years ago to have a conversation for the Greater Dallas Chamber at the time, Asian Chamber, and the National ACE to join in partnership as a MOU partner. I am serving on the board of directors. I also served as a past chair. The National Organization for Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce, and again, Susan, you're right, it's a mouthful. We are also known as a National ACE. For the past 7 months, since 1st of March, we have worked very closely with our network of over 60 chambers and business partners throughout the country to make sure that you receive the resources, information, the current information, much as possible to support our AAPI business community. The first week in March, I believe it was March 5th to 6th, my last trip to Washington, D.C., we met with KPAC. We met with a Congressional Asian Pacific Islander American Caucus to discuss the future of what this pandemic is doing to the AAPI business and the support that we need from the federal government, who became the CARE program in the PPP. The next day, we met with a Small Business Administration and their new administrator to make sure that we are included. AAPI was included at the first level of the PPP program, which turned out to be a PPP program. I do want to thank again, Susan, you and the Chamber providing us an opportunity to partner in the business conference. We don't have a lot of data. I believe there's going to be there will be some information about data that National ACE is collecting, so we can share the information and advocate to federal government, to corporations, and to other nonprofits. There's some studies that's been done a little bit since the pandemic. J.C. Morgan Chase has reported that the AAPI-owned business has declined 22% in early April. And also at the end of March, 60% of those business that was closed because of the pandemic will stay closed permanently. And also the economic impact report by Yelp also states that that the business that was closed would need opportunity immediately, support from the federal government to be able to come back. And as we all know, that hasn't happened yet. You know, the federal assistance program has stopped, and there's been a debate between the two parties, two houses, and nothing has come above at this time. You know, we have, I serve as the chair of the National AIDS Policy Committee. We developed the legislative agenda for 2 years, and we are in the process of developing that program to advocate to the House, the Senate, the federal agencies, and the White House. So that's another reason that we are in the process of collecting the data. And that we also are part of the Small Business Roundtable in Washington, D.C. And we have almost every week, we have spoken with, advocate with the legislature at the both sides of the aisle of urgency of developing a program for small business, particularly AAPI small business, a program, a package that we need immediately. You know, we will continue to do so. Doesn't matter what the White House says, doesn't matter what the agencies say, we are developing a coalition of other ethnic chambers and organizations to work as be transparent as possible. We have also developed, knowing what the pandemic is doing to our business. We also, the National AIDS has developed a program that will provide individual resources, assistance, and helping the business both financially, how to receive financial assistance, and also to restart the business operation in a very safe and strategically manner. You know, and if your business need a one-on-one consultation, please go to www.acesmallbusiness.org, and we will be happy to work with you individually or as a group. And there's no fee that's related to this. You know, and again, I know as part of this conference, the survey, the data will be collected. What we are experiencing today is not going away anytime soon. You know, our biggest concern is that if we do not receive, we do not have the resource that we need from the federal government, and we are asking to make it as simple as possible. And as I stated earlier, that have a special program for the small business, and particularly for AAPI. You know, we will continue to work on behalf of your chamber. In May, that we will have a Capitol Hill visit, and we will be inviting you to help us as we look at the agenda that's going to help us for the next 2 years, and to meet and to educate our policymakers concerning the importance of AAPI-owned business. Now, today we have 2 million AAPI-owned business throughout the country, and we generate almost $1 trillion to the economy. Not everybody knows that. Not all the policy makers know that, and so we have to continue to educate them. Thank you again for letting us be part of your business conference and your partnership, and we look forward to the future. So have a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Jimmy, for that, just that information. I can't express how important this survey is. And just as Jimmy had explained just a minute ago, feedback is of utmost importance at this point. We have to have critical data to be able to provide to our to Capitol Hill, you know, to get the support that we need for resources to be able to deliver. 60% is it's scary, and we want to be able to get lift the economy, not just you know, of course the AAPI is our focus, but all communities. We need this this support in a big way. So if you will take a few minutes, Divya has put the link for the survey in the chat box over here. It's a SurveyMonkey link right here. So please take a minute or two. It doesn't take you very long. You don't have to type in anything. They're mostly just buttons that you click on. But it's so important that we get this information out. But I also want to just take a minute just to discuss, what the chamber's about. I know you've seen, small business, of course, is our main focus, but we also focus on topics related to social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and women's issues. And as we, are growing in our agenda and our initiatives, these are focuses that take center stage and become more and more important as we grow. And that said, we have one of our main bigger events as well, just like this event is coming up in November, and it's our Women's Business Conference, and we're so excited. We have a wonderful lineup of top-notch subject matter experts and amazing inspirational speakers that are lined up. You can visit our website and see more about it. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave you for a quick intermission, and in the meanwhile, we're going to be featuring some slides about our upcoming our panel discussion that's going to be following this. And stay tuned, please don't leave. This discussion I've been looking forward to for so long. Of course, our very own Mohammed Farshori will be mediating this. This is a subject matter that's very close to his heart. And not to mention the panelists themselves are just amazing. And the wealth of information and the information that they're going to be able to give you is coming from their hearts. And what better way to experience diversity than through experience? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take the break, and I will see you guys in just a couple minutes. And please, please, please take a minute to take the survey.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being around, and I am so excited and pleased to start with our very first webinar, which is DEI, and we have none other than Mohammed Farshori, the event chair and the moderator for this panel. Mohammed, all yours.
Thank you, Neha. I appreciate it. What an amazing conference this has been so far. We heard from Chow, we heard from our amazing award winners. One of my favorite persons in Marshall was also there to receive the award, and all the amazing award winners from City Square, Amanda Austin. I mean, it's been a great day so far, and I'm so excited and honored to introduce our three amazing panelists today. I was so impressed just going through their bios and accomplishments and the impact that they're making in community. And when I say impact, real impact. Not just activities, but impact. And so I would like to go ahead and first introduce Juwan Jones. She is the Chief Diversity Officer of Baylor Scott and White Health. It's the largest not-for-profit health system in Texas. She's an impassioned advocate addressing racial and ethnic care disparities in healthcare. She serves as one of the 30 members in an executive council of the American Leadership Council for Diversity in Healthcare, focusing on guiding efforts to improve representation and care for underserved, underrepresented population. Prior to her current role, Ms. Jones served as an advocacy manager at Dallas, Texas-based Children's Health, and she has held various advocacy roles in North Texas and Arkansas. So, Juwan, thank you for being here and for willing to be a part of this panel. And I'm so lucky that I got to meet you right before this whole COVID thing hit. So, and hopefully we all can connect again. But, thank you for attending this virtually. And the next panelist we have here is Shaquan Lewis. Shaquan is the Chief Equity Officer for Pizza Hut US. In this role, he champions, promotes, and guides the company's equity and inclusion vision strategy and initiatives across Pizza Hut's footprint as a franchisor, employer, and community pillar. What an amazing brand to be the chief equity officer of. I think you go any part of the world, everyone knows Pizza Hut, right? And so Chikwan is committed to civic engagement among a number of policy-focused experiences. He has worked with the Office of Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings to analyze economic revitalization efforts in Southern Dallas, and previously served as chairman of the City of Dallas South Dallas Fair Park Opportunity Fund. And in his capacity as chairman, he has led the city board's effort to invest municipal funds via grants and loans in a historically marginalized area of Dallas. He currently serves on the board of directors for both the Dallas Zoo and City Square, and on the board of advisors for the SMU Dedman School of Law Robert B. Rowling Center for Business Law and Leadership. So, Chikwan, I'm sure you were very happy to see that City Square won the Humanitarian Award this year from the Chamber. And our next panelist is Bianca Chow. Bianca is a diversity, equity, inclusion, and well-being leader at Fossil Group. Bianca seeks to serve and empower women and young people, and invests her time mentoring high school and college-aged women through the Dallas Step of Women's Network and Gen-Her-ation. I love that name, Gen-Her-ation, a national network where young women and companies connect. Bianca is also a member of the Orchid Giving Circle at the Texas Women's Foundation, and recently stepped into a new community role, serving on the Girl Scouts of Northeast Texas Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Corporate Council. So welcome, and thank you, all of you, for being here and being part of this panel. I'm just excited because, you know, I just knowing your background, just going through your bios, I know that we are going to have a very real conversation. So Bianca, Chikwan, Juwan, thank you and welcome. And let's just go ahead and deep dive and get into the conversation, and let's start, start talking about equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, COVID-19 has changed the world that we live in and has impacted our personal and professional lives. It's the whole world we live in has totally changed. Company priorities have changed in terms of how we work, where we work, how we do business, and how we provide customer experience and market our products. What can businesses do? Because we have a lot of business owners, a lot of corporate employees, ERG groups, and what can they do to make sure that the companies don't drop the ball on diversity, equity, and inclusion during these COVID-19 crisis? So let me start with Juwan, and then we can go Chikwan and Bianca. Juwan?
So I would say the biggest thing that I would advise companies to do is to continue the conversation at work. So what's interesting is we're having these conversations in our homes, during our Zoom family reunions, during our, FaceTimes with other family members about the current state of being isolated and the racial unrest that we're seeing and the economic, pressures that we're also experiencing. And I would say that our companies need to also be a place that's welcoming of that conversation. Part of what we need as human beings is support. And as a company, you show support by listening to the context and values that your employees have. And it also helps you engage them in things that are more intrinsically valuable to them. So my biggest advice would be to just continue the conversation, continue to support one another in the corporate environment, and really lean in to understanding how people are feeling and what you might be able to do to support them.
Thanks, Juwan. Chikwan, what can businesses do to make sure that they do not drop the ball on DEI during this whole COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, thanks to ACT for having this conversation. Appreciate the work that you're doing in our state. Appreciate the space you created for this conversation. and happy to join you and the rest of the panelists, Mohammed. It's a good question. And, you know, the way I think about it is you got to chew gum and walk at the same time. If the spring and the summer showed us anything, is that you don't get to just focus on one pandemic, right? And so, and I say this because of the COVID-19 point that you're making. And in fact, if you get really focused about it, when you look at the effects of COVID-19, it's exacerbating the issues that we try to solve for with DE&I in the first place. And so my encouragement is kind of building on what Juwan said, is you got to lean further into this moment during COVID-19. You don't wait for this crisis to be over to try to solve for the one that's been existing for a really long time, because they're dovetailing in a really impactful way right now. So I say lean further into your employees by creating a culture of listening and learning and understand what people are feeling in this moment. Also lean into your customers though, right? Because, you know, we'll probably talk more about it, I would guess, but part of my vision of why we exist as market actors is to bring moral clarity to the market space. And so understand what customers need and what customers feel in this moment, particularly those who have lived experiences that are outside the margins of the mainstream society. It's a deeply important and deeply impactful time to do that work. And then the third thing is to just think about how you show up as a neighbor in a time like this, right? These twin pandemics, and one of them particularly being like the decided effects of racism and its offspring, is the time to lean into that moment as well and ask yourself as a company, what more might be asked of me? Not just running in with solutions, but asking what's asked of me and then programming against that.
Yeah, and you know, it's a time when I think every employee is watching us, right?
Yeah.
They expect this. It's, you know, sometimes, you know, if it wasn't this crazy, I mean, maybe employees were, you know, not that focused, but every employee, regardless of how small or big a company is, they're expecting their companies to do the right thing during this time. So Shikon, great point, you know, lean into your customers, employees, what do they care? And, you know, to your point, Juwan, continue the conversation to support one another. So thank you. And Bianca?
Sure, I'd love to piggyback on that. I love getting to follow up on what Juwan and Shaquan said. Part of me is a little sad that my name doesn't rhyme with theirs because I feel a little bit left out, but that's okay. But I love what Juwan mentioned in terms of creating those safe spaces. And then of course, what Shaquan talked about in terms of listening and learning. I think that's so incredibly important for us as individuals because we're all on a journey. But then we have the privilege of being able to work on diversity, equity, inclusion in our 9-to-5 jobs. And so I think one of the things that I see that continues to be an opportunity is how do we educate and empower our employees? They're coming at this from all different places. You might have a D&I champion who's at step 500 on their 1,000 step journey when it comes to diversity inclusion. I stole that from Chris Moreland, by the way. He's another D&I colleague. But you might have an employee who's at step 1 and they're paralyzed to get to step 2, but they're saying, I need help. And I think part of it is when you're talking about something like systemic racism, social injustice, and potentially that has not been part of your lived experience, you don't even have their vernacular to talk about it. And I believe that words and the meaning of words and having vocabulary is such a key step. And so before we can expect our organizations or our employees to understand what it means to be anti-racist, we might need to start with understanding what is unconscious bias and the fact that we all have it and the fact that we have a ability to combat it. We're not helpless. I think then when you can talk about bias in that way, you can move towards talking about allyship and what role you can play. And that gets you further along the journey in terms of really understanding as an individual within your community and then also within your organization, what can I do? I'm really passionate about this because I think as an Asian American woman, I've felt some conviction of how I haven't maybe played as active of a role in the past as I should have. And I want to not sit in that guilt, but maybe use that conviction to say, well, how do I use that to propel me forward? And how do I bring others along with me? And so I think it's such a nuanced conversation in terms of what can we do as individuals, but also then what do we do in organizations, whether we have D&I in our job description or not. There's a ton to learn. There's many voices to listen to in this virtual world. I would say one of the benefits is there's a ton of webinars and podcasts and books that you can read just to help yourself on that journey. And I say, if you start today, that's a great place to start. If you start tomorrow, that's also a great place to start. I think it's important simply to start, even if it's a little uncomfortable or you're scared. I think
it just takes one step by step.
Thanks, Bianca. That, you made such amazing point, but the one that really got stuck was you have to get involved in this regardless if this is part of your job description or not, right? Because there are a lot of other skill sets that companies want everyone to innovate, right? Innovation is not just, if, oh, you're in HR, you're not supposed to innovate, or you're in, but we need to start looking at diversity and inclusion as part of the job. Like it's everyone's job to make sure that everyone is allowed to bring their whole self to work, right? So the great point, and and asking yourself, what can I do? Which and you mentioned equity, and Chow made a great point. Inclusion is not enough, right? Because for the longest time, I remember when, back, like say a few years, 10, 15 years back, it was all about diversity, and people be added inclusion to it. And then equity was added, right? And now everyone's like, wait, inclusion is not enough, right? One of our favorite quotes that's of St. Marshall, diversity is inviting someone to the party. Inclusion is asking them to dance. And, equity is, through my angle, is making sure that the person can dance. And if they want to dance, do they know how to dance? Someone needs to teach them the steps and, all those things. So I really appreciate that. That kind of leads us into the next question. And, I would love to hear your take overall, but I would also love to hear what you guys are doing in your roles or what your company is doing during this time. So one of the most important questions companies are asked these days is, are you walking the talk? So how can companies go from just talking about diversity and equality to working towards building real inclusion and equity? So let's start with you, Bianca, and then we'll go to Shaquan and Juwan.
Sure. I think it's a really good question. And I think it's a timely question because I think certainly many companies, rightly so, made certain statements and commitments internally and externally this summer. But I think the key part then is when you're thinking about your stakeholders, whether that's your employees or whether that's your consumers. I work in retail, so a key stakeholder group for us externally, like Shaquan, is consumers and how they think about us and how we're addressing some of these really tough issues. And I think the key thing is whether it's a baby step or it's a giant step, we have to follow up with action. And that action looks different for every organization. So I'm not saying that it's a one size fits all, but I think understandably so, your employees and your consumers can poke some holes and they can be very critical if you're simply making statements that can feel like lip service without action. And action might mean a commitment of an investment. It might mean expanding your D&I team. It might mean you're going to do an assessment or a diagnostic. And so I think that last one is really key in terms of there are so many blind spots and there can be so much bias in the way that we do things and the way organizations are set up. And we're seeing that. I think this pandemic that we're walking through is illuminating the way that some of our systems benefit some and create disadvantages for others. And so we're able to have just a lot more honest conversation in terms of how was that system created, and potentially where are some opportunities where we need to unlearn certain behaviors or how we've made decisions. And so I look to that in terms of, is your senior leadership all on board and are they appropriately making statements in terms of calling out racism and social injustice, but then what are they doing as a result of that in terms of their actions? And then how transparent are they being after? Again, that looks different for everybody, but when you're going to make a statement, when you're going to follow up with some actions, I think there's also this expectation in the same way that we run our businesses that you would follow up on our progress. And again, I think no one is expecting that your progress is going to show that in 2 months you fixed everything, you're perfect. I think we really want to hear, we're still working on this part. We need to unlearn this part. This external objective assessment revealed these blind spots potentially, and now we can have a much more honest conversation of it. And I think it's very much so tied to what you talked about in inclusion. If we're just addressing diversity, that can be a fruitless effort. If we're really looking at inclusion in terms of how we do things, what access do people have to meaningful roles and stretch projects, that's where you really are doing the hard work of understanding kind of what your progress looks like, and you're measuring it. I always say what gets measured gets done. And so companies have great resources and data and ways to measure things. And so we need to use that same rigor around our business to address diversity, equity, inclusion as a strategic business imperative.
Awesome, thanks, Nick. And you know, it's like the first step as you to your talking points that, you know, what gets measured gets done. And also you mentioned something around realizing that there is a problem for us, right? Like a lot of time people don't even accept, like if you say, hey, there is an issue where we feel our employees, you know, don't understand, you know, certain issues when it comes to DEI. And that's why a lot of teams stay silent. They think it's a very sensitive subject. We shouldn't touch, we shouldn't talk about it. So, and I really, really respect the companies that are actually, you know, coming out of their comfort zone, realizing like unconscious bias, we all have it. If someone says they don't have unconscious, they don't have that, they're lying. So thanks, Bianca. Shaquan, what, you know, if, same question, you know, are you walking the talk? So how can companies go from just talking about DEI to working towards building real inclusion and equity? And if you can share a few examples that Pizza Hut is doing during these challenging times.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, let me just kind of give you some of the way that I'm thinking about the journey, because I think there's some principles in that, because her point is insightful about it's going to look different for everybody. But you know, for me, like real talk, we have to first define the talk. Like, how do you talk right? You know, if you're gonna walk the talk, like what are the words you're using? And so, you know, my title's intentional, and the very first time I addressed the company and our franchisees and their employees was really intentional. And I you know, partitioned out this journey of diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And I talk about diversity as making sure we appreciate that's representational progress, right? Like, who's in the room? What do our faces look like? And then inclusivity, kind of like you said, is this idea of like, are people finding a space for the expression of themselves? But the equity work that I'm trying to do, that I'm inviting the rest of my leadership team to join in on, is really interrogating the systemic pieces of our business, the institutional, procedural ways that we work in a lot of different dimensions, and asking ourselves a really critical question. Are they perpetuating equity, or are they perpetuating inequity? And when we interrogate that work, it invites us into some uncomfortable conclusions, which spawns some really good and I think pretty righteous work. So level setting around what we're doing when we say equity is important, because I think the equity work protects your gains in diversity. It protects your gains in inclusivity. But without equity, the work that you do around representation and about belonging, it falls flat because it'll never last if you don't have an equitable environment. So level setting around that is the first thing that we try to do. And then for our business, we talk about it in 3 dimensions that I kind of have alluded to. You know, how do we show up as an employer? How do we show up as a franchisor? Because we're 99% franchised in Pizza US, so that's a really deeply important way that we operate as a business. Then how do we show up as a neighbor? So just briefly, as an employer, this is where we're really going through this journey of asking ourselves the hard questions, not just what do our numbers look like? Why are our numbers like that? Double clicking on things like promotion rate and attrition rate, and asking ourselves, what are the behaviors as an organization that we have or can fix that sit underneath that may be exacerbating some of the problems we see, especially along the dimensions of race, sometimes along the dimension of gender as well. And then what does that invite us into to do differently to replicate the outcomes that we actually want? A big part of this is actually creating a culture of listening and learning. I was really stunned when I started doing this work, how critical conversations are. Coming from like, you know, running the Pizza Express business, my mind was all about strategy this, strategy that. But there's a lot of like head and heart work that had to be done as well, which is foundational to make some of these other things work. So like we're doing this whole sweeping around our front door before we go and sweep around someone else's business first. And then just 2 more points, like as a franchisor, one, we got to ask ourselves, like in a franchise business, we got to make sure we continue to look like the company, look like the communities that we operate in. And so it's really important who our franchisees are. And if there are opportunities for us to make sure that our franchisees look like folks that are probably on this call and look like our panel more than they do today, we have to do work around that as well. And there's some systemic questions we got to answer around how people come in to get that piece right. And then how we show up for our customers as a business with our franchisees. Because like the thing about pizza, it ought to bring everybody together. But if you're going to do that, like you got to really understand what America looks like and react to that. And then that dovetails into that point about being a neighbor that I'm talking about, which is we are a part of communities. Like we have to go beyond the transaction beyond the you buying the product that we're really proud of, and like sitting next to and coming alongside people that we are serving and asking, how can we really show up as a brand in a way that makes a difference? Like those three pillars are the things that we're looking at to make sure that we move this forward in a way that is not just a fly by night thing, but changes how we are and fundamentally encodes this type of equitable thinking in our business.
Love that. Love those 3 pointers and how you double clicked on those, Shikman, because, it's a lot of companies, if they're focusing on employees, they're not focusing on, the suppliers, the franchises, and the neighbors. Love the term neighbors, and not customers, but neighbors. Because they're customers too, right? Your employers are your customers too. So at the end of the day, everyone is watching. The impact that Pizza is making. So thanks for sharing that, Shikman. Juwan, your take on that question.
So I would say a lot of it needs to be, how do I set up systems so that I am accountable? So we've seen quite often, there was probably 3 years ago, we heard tech companies talking about their representation and how they were missing out on women and they were missing out on underrepresented communities in their workforce. And from a healthcare standpoint, the way that I'm really trying to help us not only have the conversations, but be active around the conversations is the fact that healthcare draws a certain kind of person, meaning people come to healthcare because they want to help people. And because it's hard work, it's not fun work all the time. COVID has been taxing, but the reality is people show up because they want to help people. And so what I've been doing is really helping the company understand the connection between the social injustices and how that affects people's health. And so you find that common ground to talk to people on so that we're all speaking toward the same goal of helping our communities reach their ultimate goal of health. And when you have that conversation, then you can step back and say, well, what might be getting in the way of that? And you have conversations around, okay, so if we don't feel like all of our communities have access and are able to reach their highest levels of health, what is getting in the way? Well, maybe we don't understand the real health issues of that community. Maybe our numbers are telling us one thing, but maybe that's not what's valued to that community. So we need to ask questions. We need to also let the community know how their outcomes are happening. So being very transparent about, okay, we're dealing with COVID and we see a different incidence and we see a different outcome for different communities when they contract COVID. And talking to those communities about there's a difference and we need you guys to help us figure out how to make that not a difference. The bigger thing is when you really institute transparency, it creates vulnerability among all. And that's really what's going to propel us to the next level in DEI, is when we are very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I start off all of my conversations with any group saying, I'm just as uncomfortable as you are, and I get paid for this work. So the reality is that I'm going to be vulnerable in this situation and I need you to be vulnerable. We have to be transparent. And if you do say something wrong, or you say a terminology, or you have an understanding that I don't agree with, we're going to agree to be adults so that I can share with you the right terminology. And you can ask me questions about why I shared that with you. And we can have a dialogue. We don't get anywhere in a lot of this work because we've never been comfortable with saying things, and the fear of saying the wrong thing is a stupid fear. And you can put that in print. Juwan Jones said, the fear of saying the wrong thing is stupid. Because if you create an environment where people are transparent and comfortable with the uncomfortable, then we're all teachable. And that's really what has to happen in this situation, is we have to learn from one another. We need to be teachable and we need to be transparent. And that is really the only way we're going to move and give evidence to our patients, our members, our customers, our friends, our neighbors, that we are in it for the long haul. So once again, it is all about that conversation and are we willing to have it? And are your leaders willing to engage in it in different settings, at different times, with different people?
Awesome. Thank you. And love those pointers, transparency, accountability. And, I'm going to use that quote a lot of times now, like fear of saying the wrong thing is stupid. Love it. So, then I think that was great. I really appreciate those points on the COVID-19 situation and what companies can do and how we can, walk the talk and make real impact. The tragic and horrific deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery have reignited a centuries-long conversation around systemic racism in our country. And many non-Black Americans want to stand in solidarity, but they don't know how. And that completely aligns with your point of, the fear of saying wrong thing is stupid. I personally hope that this is not a moment, but a movement. So, Juwan, what is the number one way we as individuals and companies can make a substantial difference in this movement?
I would say from an individual standpoint, I was doing a listening session at our company and someone asked me a question from a DCEO interview I did, and they didn't include the entire quote. They included the portion about we need to make more friends. I will tell you that I don't think that us making more friends is the end, but it's definitely a great start. Part of what we see as underrepresented communities is we really band together to make sure that the whole of us are okay. And sometimes we have to understand that our family is even larger than the community that we were trying to be a part of. And so I would say one of the things that I would really ask and implore people to do is if you have an African-American or Black friend, check on them, ask them, have a real conversation. I think I had the best Zoom happy hour with some of my colleagues. We were talking and, they'd seen that I had done some things with my hair and they finally asked about those things. And we had a real conversation. I was like, while I look fly right now, this look takes me hours. And let me explain to you what all I have to do. And we got to talking about that issue and it uncovered, them saying, well, Juwan, I never thought to ask you about that. And I never thought how closely aligned that was with your identity and how it's fearful for you to show up in a place because of your hair. And we were able to really connect because I tell you, our differences are our similarities. What you find quite often is women who have straight hair want curly hair and women who have curly hair want straight hair. And there are more similarities than what we know of. And when you can find those similarities and build a conversation around those, you also can accept the differences. And I'll just leave with one final sort of thought around this, is when we think about how the coverage of George, when that situation first happened, what we heard newscasters saying was, well, he had a record and he had done this, this, and that, and he had been in juvenile detention and he'd done these things. And the reason that that happened is around systemic racism, meaning that you have to paint a villain of people so that you don't truly have to accept what's happened. And in this moment, in this time, we need for all of our family members, regardless of race or ethnicity, to understand that while people can really respect me, I'm still terrified of being pulled over. And while people really find comfort in being around me, there are people who are very scared to get on the elevator with me. And I am fully educated. I feel like I'm a nice person. I think I'm kind of nice. And yet these things still happen to me. And so part of that conversation is helping us all put a face to the problem so that we can see the unjust in that. If that can still happen to me and everybody thinks I've done everything right, then it is a problem that is far beyond me being a bad seed. And that's what we need to come to. It's a problem far beyond. And the way you show up is reach out and try to get more context. You can only walk in the shoes that you have. So sometimes ask questions so that you can maybe try on somebody else's shoe.
Thanks, Siobhan. And the one thing that I did, especially after this movement started, even though the VLM has been there, but there was something different about this movement, right? It was people where there were more people curious to learn about this issue and the systemic racism and the systemic oppression. And as a someone who belongs to one of the most privileged minorities in this country, one thing that I did was learn about the why behind it, right? Having dialogue with people. My focus this month is to understand, like I'm going to invest time to learn why 70% of the homeless population in Dallas is Black. It cannot happen by error. It just can't happen by error, right? And that's when, those are little things that people have to understand. Read about the South Dallas bombings. There was a thing to read about, as Asian Americans, a lot of people don't know that Seagoville, which is not even an hour from here, used to be a Japanese internment camp. So it's, a lot of times people don't read about these things till, so one thing that I have learned is, it's, as you said, check on your friends and, find the similarities, but at the same time, educate yourself about the real issues, understand this question. So thanks, Jawan. Shaquan, your take on this.
Yeah. Man, first of all, just real quick, Jawan's hair point though is super extra real. I mean, this is an innovation of authenticity for me, the way I look now. Like for people that knew me at the law firm, or heck, even a couple years ago, they'd be like, how's this brother out here with this beard and this hair? Like, that's just me in a moment deciding I'm gonna do me. And like part of what I owe the company as a leader is to like show up as myself, to try to make space for more people to show up as themselves. So Juwan, you preached a whole word to me when you said it just then. So snaps on that. So in terms of what we can do, listen, I think we got to embrace righteous rage and really practice radical grace. So let me tell you a little bit of what I mean by that. So this idea of righteous rage, like indifference is part of what's going on in this country is a ton of indifference. We're absolutely seeing a lot of anger, but it's being fed by a callous disregard for lived experiences that are different than our own. A belief that when someone says, this is what my experience is, it can't be real. And so like this indifference is festering into something pretty sinister, I think. But what righteous rage asks us to do is to really evaluate, devoid of what I bring, what's in my bag personally, right? To really investigate this idea of like what's right and wrong. And there's obviously like deep relationship and context you need to get to some of that. But what righteous rage makes you do is it makes you burn and it makes you go do something about something, right? And so you talked about this moment being and feeling a little bit different. I cannot count the number of white people that I work with that moved from, oh my goodness, I didn't realize this was so bad, to like, what is going on? This is wrong. I can't take it, to like, tell me what I can physically go do right now to make a difference. That's righteous rage that's setting people on fire. And we have to give ourselves over to that. And I don't think righteous rage has to manifest itself in the worst, possible context, but it won't let you sit and be content in the face of injustice. You can't handle it. It gets all over you. It is righteous rage consumed me when I started thinking about, like, notwithstanding me being Black, I'm a Black man, for example. I'm a straight Black man. And there's so much comparative privilege I have vis-a-vis Juwan and Bianca and people who maybe in the LGBTQ plus community. And it caught me on fire and I couldn't sit and watch that stuff anymore, right? And so it moved me to do something. We have to give ourselves over to that. But there's this piece of radical grace that's critically important too. And what radical grace demands is that, it's kind of what Juwan was saying. What it demands is, like, as we bring to the surface like our truths and our realities and these demands for justice that cannot be devoid of like historical context, you have to give people space to ask questions they may feel is stupid, right? Because without radical grace, you're not having these real dialogues. And if we don't change hearts and minds, which happens through grace, then we're going to miss the boat, right? And so radical grace is not this idea of like just being nice. It's not just about avoiding conversation. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It also demands you to confront things and to have real conversations and to explore experiences that are different than yours. So when we burn with righteousness about the things that are wrong, and then practice this idea of radical grace, which is a deep commitment and probably the most painful part of this, which is me being like, you have lived a life or you have said something that does not square with what is right in my reality. How can I invite you into community so we can do something different? We can't get together. We can't move forward without that type of radical grace. And so those things have to be something we put on the table, and it costs all of us, right? And that can suck for people who feel like they've had to give a ton or who have been left out for a while, but there's space for that on the spectrum where righteous rage exists as well.
That is awesome. I just love those words, righteous rage and radical grace. And, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have watched Wendell Stevenson's video on going from tolerance to understanding through dialogue. And that's what it is, right? We need to stop tolerating each other and start having dialogues to go from tolerance to understanding. And that is not the first step, but that is the only way we can learn about each other and get over, not being ignorant about what's going on. So thanks, Shaquan. Bianca?
I will say I love following the two of them, but it's also very challenging because there are just so many nuggets of wisdom that they bring. I mean, for sure, one thing that I thought about when Shaquan was speaking is this quote from Martin Luther King: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And I feel like this movement is something where I'm kind of seeing that quote come to life. We can no longer look at the media, like Juan mentioned, and think, well, that's an exception, or I'm going to believe this villainized story that I'm hearing, or I need more information, so I'm not going to do anything. There's unfortunately this racial reckoning where you're seeing so many instances of injustice, and it is compelling people like Shaquan is mentioning to ask more questions, to do something. They cannot sit any longer in, I need more information, or I don't know what to do. I'm not an activist. I feel like now that idea that you have to be a D&I professional or that you have to be an activist allows you to do work in this space has just kind of gone out the window. It's like, if you're a human being and you understand that we live in a system that has some components that allow for people to get ahead faster, and it has some components that make it more challenging for others to get ahead. And the fact that we're all starting at different places as well, it's really like the core of equity in terms of not just betting on equality, like let's just give fairness to everybody, but the fact of the matter is, when you're thinking about equity, you recognize like we're all starting from different places. And a lot of those starting points have nothing to do with what I deserve or what I earn. The fact that I was born in the US, like that, there's great privilege that comes with that. And I didn't deserve that or earn that. It just happened to be where I was born. And so I think, in kind of piggybacking on what Juan and Shaquan mentioned, is one of my biggest takeaways is like, how do I continue to listen and learn? And that's very individual to me, again, because when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, that is not my lived experience. And so before I jump to action because I feel like I need to say something on social media, or before I jump to action because I don't want people to think that I don't care, there is a period of time, and that looks different for everyone, where there needs to be more listening and learning. And I love what Juwan mentioned in terms of, if you have a friend and you have built trust and honesty, and that person has a different skin color than you, how do you potentially ask them questions about their lived experience that maybe you've never asked before? Maybe you never thought to ask that. If you don't have a friend who looks different from you, how do you work on that? Can you start a book club? Can you start volunteering in different areas of the city where you don't live? Can you create a lunch and learn group at your office? I think that there is intentionality that comes with developing relationships with people who don't look like you. Of course, our affinity is to be friends with people who share hobbies that we like and who live near where we live and have similar passions. And so I understand that it takes great intentionality and action to pursue relationships with folks who are different from you and realize that there's richness from that. I am wary of saying that because I'm certainly not saying go get a token minority friend, right? I would never want to be someone's token minority friend. But I also recognize if I look at what I'm reading, who I follow on social media, who I spend time with, if it's fairly homogenous and I'm saying I want to better understand the issues that are going around me and the challenges that people in my community face that maybe I don't face, that might mean I need to seek out more diverse voices. And it could purely start with, I'm just going to start listening to this podcast someone told me about. I'm going to read this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, by myself. I'm not even going to tell anyone I'm reading it. That could be a first step, so that after you read the book, you could approach someone else and say, hey, I want to read another book. Would you want to read that with me? And so again, it looks different for everyone, but what I would say is to move forward on that journey, it takes a ton of intentionality. And part of that journey for me was recognizing that I wanted to diversify where I was getting information from, who I was spending time with, where I was investing my time, talent, and energy. And so that looks a lot of different ways. I belong to a church, so I joined a racial reconciliation group at church. I'm a part of the Orchid Giving Circle, and so I wanted to be more active in our grants committee to understand what are nonprofits doing in our community to help underserved Asian populations. That's something I can learn. So I'm a naturally curious person, so maybe I'm giving too many examples in terms of all the things that I wanted to do, but I recognized I wanted to learn quickly and I wanted to listen a lot before acting. I have maybe a fault in terms of to act. So that was an opportunity for me in terms of maybe this time you need to pause, you need to listen and talk less, and you need to learn from a myriad of different people and places and books and resources and use and leverage that to help determine then what are my next steps of action.
Awesome, thanks, Bianca. So the big takeaway is listen and learn. And, to Juwan's point, don't be afraid of saying things. And because, in a time like this, silence is compliance, right? So it's better to say something silly rather than just saying, that's not my place. I should just, sit back and just wait and watch. Because, the way I look at it, because, I realized it very early when I moved to the US from India, is, I'm very privileged. And there are people here who are not, and I will never mistake my privilege as freedom, because not everyone in this country has freedom, right? Because there's, as to Shaquan's point, there is an oppressive divide where, as a straight man, I have privilege when it comes to women's rights. So I need to stand up and speak up. As a straight man, I have privilege. I'm on the other side of the oppressive divide where I have privilege over LGBTQ community. And then when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I have privilege because I'm not Black and the community needs me. They need allies to come and stand up for them because, it's not just an issue that should be handled by the Black community. It impacts all of us. So thank you for this amazing point. There's one question that came up from one of the audience members here. Many non-marginalized employees feel diversity is reverse racism. What advice do you have to address this concern? Any one of you want to take that?
Read the question again.
Many non-marginalized employees feel that diversity is reverse racism. What advice do you have to address this concern?
So I would say what's interesting, and this is just off the top of my head, is when you hear things like, us having this conversation is making me uncomfortable. It's, this isn't a problem that everybody faces, and why are we having this conversation? Well, the reality is, if you look back at how America was created, and you look back at our systems, our structures, all of the learnings and advancement that we've gotten, We've gotten that advancement because groups of different people from different walks of life with different eyesight on things, with different ways to solve problems come together. What we see right now is this sort of division in our country between groups. But if you also notice, despite what some are saying, unemployment is high, jobs have left, and it's because we aren't coming together as a group to solve those problems. The way that America has advanced is when people have a voice. And for a long time, women couldn't vote. And they couldn't vote because they thought that, they didn't need to vote. And then women started voting. And I would bet to say that we've made better decisions about folks who are in office. So from my standpoint, we can't have a future if we don't talk about our differences to find our similarities and how we solve problems together. The reality is that our world is only going to be more diverse. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's only getting more diverse. And we're in the state of Texas, which is a state that is very favorable for business. And so businesses will move here and bring in all types of different people. And until we can all work together on those businesses, none of us will get better. It takes all of us to get better. As they say, if you add water to the ocean, all of the boats come up. I mean, that's just the reality of how we move forward as a country. So I would ask that person, who's kind of having opposition to it, to ask, do you want new ways to solve problems? Do you want us to be innovative? Do you want us to challenge ourselves? And if that's not the case, then you're right. We don't need to have a diversity talk. However, with the way that the world is growing and becoming smaller in one community, we have to have diversity. We have to understand diversity.
What I'd add to that, Mohammed, I hesitated, and thank you for hitting that first, Juwan. I hesitated because I need to practice radical grace before I answered that question. That question is a real pet peeve for me. And I think my mom is watching, so I wanted to make sure I thought long and hard about how to approach it. Look, I don't understand why some people are just dying to be oppressed. I don't know that I'll ever understand that. But what I've found as I've had to walk through these dialogues myself very recently is beginning with the premise of let's get serious about language. I think Bianca brought up language first. So let's investigate what racism is. So let's come to a definition. We can be sociological with it. We can do Merriam-Webster's with it. And then let's talk about what we're doing in our diversity programs. Help me understand how these things match up, because I've had to move from just ignoring that as an incredibly silly comment to like, I've had to spend a little bit of time because you're going and saying something like this to other people and you're working yourselves up. And the reality is, upon a serious interrogation, these things don't match. I'm sorry, right? Like this idea of ensuring that that people have the full capacity to participate fully in spaces that we share. There's no serious basis upon which you can define that as racism. The idea that it is an ambition for us to serve people with people who also come from communities that reflect that, as opposed to just looking to present ourselves as one way, these things just don't square. Sometimes people have to be called to the carpet on intellectual dishonesty, just to be honest. Depending on the relationship, you do it with love. Sometimes you do it within the rigorous context of a debate. But I do think we have to call this out, and we have to stop this stuff dead in its tracks, because that type of language is really dangerous, and it's spawning something really ugly in our country right now. And it's incumbent upon those of us who have seen the sunlight to really help people walk through that. Now, not everybody can finish the journey, right? But that really is a case where, you don't have to necessarily go on offense, but I believe that's a time to stand and be like, let's really do, you want to do this thing, let's really do that thing. And like Juwan was saying, when you really look at what we're trying to do with diversity, inclusivity, and God Almighty equity, there's no way to make that sing. And people that don't want to see that, I'm also learning, not some folks are where they are, and you deal with the 75% of people who are ready and available to be moved in the right way. But I get the question. It's a real thing, and that's not going to stop.
It is a real thing, and I can't tell you how many times I have heard that question. But it comes in different forms, right? As people will say things like, "Oh, where is my ERG?" Right? And you know what's behind that, right? But a lot of times it's because people feel left out, and it's hard for the other side to explain that. Like one time I was at a conference, and this conversation came up, and someone said, "Well, if the Supreme Court has not made a decision about your life, on who you can marry, when you can vote, when you can own property, you have privilege. And if they have not, then we are here to fight for that, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally, and there is no supremacy of anything, ideology, politics, religion, race. Everyone is treated equal, and people should not feel threatened by equality, right? It's not a piece of pie that I take equality. If you treat me equally, then you're not going to get it. It's so the beautiful points made, Juwan and Shaquan. Bianca, do you want to throw anything in before we jump into the next question?
I was simply going to piggyback on what you mentioned about pie, and maybe it's because I'm a food person, but I think you're right. I think for some, the heart of that question is that potentially they think this is a zero-sum game. So for us to focus on this group means I'm going to maybe have to sacrifice something. And so I love Shaquan's heart in terms of just asking more probing questions, right? There's got to be more behind that question. And potentially for someone, it's kind of what you mentioned in terms of, I feel left out. I don't really know if I have a part, but for some, it might truly be the assumption that I'm going to have to give something up. I'm going to have to sacrifice something for us to continue this conversation. And that's scary when you're really getting at the heart of it. And I think what's helpful then is to point people then towards the data, exactly like Juwan mentioned, in terms of how diversity drives business. Like one of the quotes that I look at a lot from McKinsey is that companies in the top 25 quartile for ethnic and cultural diversity outperform those in the fourth quartile by 36% in profitability. It's a very similar statistics when you're looking at gender diversity as well. And so potentially, if you can also pivot that conversation when you're having it with someone they've taken a personal risk to ask that. And I'm assuming some trust if they would ask a question like that. I'm hoping that there's positive intent around that and truly wanting to understand and learn. And so then when you can speak to the data around how diversity drives profitability in business, it really changes the conversation from, oh, I'm going to give something up. And it feels emotional to talk about diversity. And it shifts it towards, how does this help all boats rise? Exactly like Juwan mentioned, when the tide rises. And so I think that's helpful, but I think sometimes to get at the core of where that question is coming from means more questions and being gracious and grace-filled, like Shaquan mentioned, to get to that point, so that potentially you have someone who's like, I've never thought of it that way. And then there certainly are folks who are asking it to antagonize. And I think that's then the bigger question in terms of, are they adding to the culture of your organization or are they not? Is that just not something that they can pivot and adjust to if your company is saying, we're going in this direction and we want you to come with us. But if you don't want to come with us, that is a different conversation. So I'll end it there.
Very well said. And to Shaquan's point, like these questions, like 10 years back, I would just laugh at this question or say, but it's real. There are a lot of people who feel this way, that, like talking about diversity, equality, equity, talking about treating others equal is reverse racism. So I really appreciate, all the great points you made, and hopefully, the individual who asked that question is now fully equipped to go back and have that real conversation. Thank you. Jumping to the other question, this will be our last question. We have 6 minutes left. So a lot of companies are at a very early stage of EEI conversation, right? Like some companies have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, but now some new companies, startups, small businesses, and a lot of big major companies too have just recently started these conversations. And we have a few of the CEOs, we have a few company ERG members here. What is one piece of advice you would give to company CEOs, employees, and the chambers that have just recently started the conversation, and what action items would you like to give to them, to people on the call? Juwan?
Well, I guess because I'm in an organization that counts on science, that tends to be my starting point. And so really looking at, are you doing an employee survey? If you are, there's a question about respect or value or something on it from each individual employee. Are you desegregating that information to make sure that there's no variance? Because I argue that all of our employees should experience our company the same. And if you're seeing a variance in those outcomes, then it's telling you need to dig deeper and start asking more questions. Understand what your culture is doing to either support or not support a DEI journey. And when you understand that, then you can start helping and bringing those people along to drive out variance. My biggest thing is, when I'm looking at patient outcomes, is why do I have a variance? We understand how to treat this. I should have no variance. And so that is always the first thing that I want to do, is drive out any variance I see, which means that I have to ask more questions of the people who aren't able to, come up with the same measure as other groups. So I would say definitely start with understanding, do you have variance in experience? And also asking people questions, pointed questions, specific questions about said variance. It tells you a lot, and it gives you a great starting point.
Thanks, Juwan. Bianca?
Yes, I would say, to piggyback on what Jawan said, I come from a business background. And so, the data tells a story. And so we work for organizations that pride ourselves on innovation, on meeting our customers, wildest demands and desires. And so we have such rigor around measuring our performance and our business and our market share. And I feel like for some organizations, they think about diversity and inclusion, and sometimes it's this discretionary HR project or it's compliance. And so I would challenge companies, you're incredibly resourced with smart people, systems, ways to track data. I would encourage you to use that framework and that rigor around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Again, what gets measured gets done. And so if you simply start with, we're going to establish a baseline and we want to understand where we're at today, and then have an honest conversation around the table. Are we happy with that? Does that reflect our diverse consumer base, or does it not? Most likely you're going to have a gap, because no company would say we perfectly represent our diverse consumer base. And so then that gives you a runway. Short-term and long-term, what are we going to do? Are we going to attract more diverse talent and look at recruiting as a mechanism? Or are we going to look at the workforce that we have and understand where are the inequities in the system and work on retention and development? But again, if you aren't looking at that data, if you haven't operationalized a way to have a timetable or mechanism to look at that, then it can be easy to put on the shelf, or it can be easy to say, well, we have a D&I person over there and she's working on it. And so the rest of the organization maybe doesn't need to be accountable for it. And I think when you're really looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion as a strategic business imperative, which tons and tons of data has shown, then you need to address it that way. You need to measure it. You need to have accountability. Your most senior level leaders need to weigh in and be a part of driving it, and they need to be accountable in the same way that you drive your business. You would never say, we have this sales plan, but we're not going to talk about the timeline or who's accountable or what the project plan is. And so that would just be my encouragement in terms of, I get that diversity, equity, inclusion can seem overwhelming or scary, but you run a great business, and so you can use that business acumen to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, because it is a strategic business, and you're going to see the benefits.
Thanks, Bianca. Shaquan?
Yeah, I won't double back on any of what was said, because I really lean into what they say. And Bianca and Juwan, really, I'm honored to be doing work like this with you. I'll just say the framework principles are really critical for how you start approaching this work. At Pizza Hut, people are sick of hearing me talk about intentionality, authenticity, and humility. We all know what those words mean. And I make sure to begin every conversation about this topic with those words and weave them in, because the mindset and those guiding principles are really critical. The last thing is, I do think companies in the early stages should really consider I don't know whether you call it a training or a convening, but a racial equity training or convening to really level set your organization around a common set of language, a common set of facts, community agreements, and shared values to move this forward, to make it a part of your business, because cultures have to change for businesses to change.
And Siobhan, so start talking about it, make sure that you take a scientific approach, because numbers don't lie, and love it, intentionality, and racial equality training. Because I know that now the trainings have also, there's been a lot of innovations in training. I love the unconscious bias training. I recently did one which was how not to be a bystander, and echo chambers, and so there's so many amazing trainings. There's a lot of free trainings out there too. If your company doesn't have your own learning platforms and things like that, there's some amazing Harvard Business Review courses. There's some a lot of free courses out there that folks on the call and can go and take. So I think we are over 1 minute, but Juan, Bianca, Siobhan, thank you so much for your time today. This was an amazing conversation, and I can't wait to see you guys in person so we can continue this conversation at lunch or for coffee. So thank you again, and on behalf of the Asian Chamber of Texas, I thank all the folks who participated and the audience, and then also all of you for the time and for bringing your whole self to this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Juwan, Bianca, Shaquan, your insights are remarkable, and we thank you for your participation, your contribution to this. This is a conversation that's ongoing. It doesn't end here, and I hope that you will continue to stay tuned. And I speak to the audience when I say this as well. I hope and pray that you are all part of the continued conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion as ACT will continue to bring them to you. And that said, I want to say a big thank you to Ms. Ann Chow today for being our special speaker for our keynote. And of course to St. Marshall for indulging us for a few minutes to accept the award on behalf of Dallas Mavericks. And of course, a big congratulations to all the award winners. You guys are the ones who inspire us every day, and you're the ones who set the standards for what our community and everybody else looks up to. So keep on doing what you're doing. And Shaquan, I'm going to steal your quote of the whole radical grace and the righteous rage and radical change. That's my new mantra for sure. Now I just want to make sure and invite everybody else to continue tomorrow. We're just closing day one of our business conference. Tomorrow we have day two. We will be featuring our two panel discussions. The first one will be on international trade, featuring our two consuls general, one from Japan and one from Canada. So stay tuned for that one. And then the second panel will be on digital transformation, featuring conversations about the artificial intelligence and machine learning topics, things that are kind of over my head, but hopefully they'll bring it down to size and we'll be able to understand it. This is for everyday use, digital transformation that's going to change our world in 2030. So on that, I'm going to go ahead and close, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you for joining, and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care, everybody.